Many people associate Africa with white people, but much of the continent has a history of European settlement. In 1989, there were an estimated 4.6 million people with European ancestry on the African continent. Most are of Dutch, British, Portuguese, German, and French descent. All people in the world belong to one species, Homo sapiens, but there are obvious differences in our appearances all through the world. Of the estimated 1.3 billion people who are living on the black continent, less than 1% is of white European descent, and some countries tend to have a greater population of white Europeans than others. The earliest permanent European communities in Africa were formed at the Cape of Good Hope, Luanda in Angola, Sao Tome Island, and Santiago, Cape Verde, through the introduction of Portuguese and Dutch traders or military personnel. Other groups of white settlers arrived in newly established European colonies in Africa. Before regional decolonization, white Africans may have numbered up to 6 million persons and were represented in every part of the continent. Also, the discovery of valuable resources in Africa's interior and the introduction of quinine as a cure for malaria altered this long-standing trend, and a new wave of European immigrants arrived on the continent between 1890 and 1918. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of our daily uploads. So without further ado, here are the top 10 countries with the highest white population. We begin our journey at number 10, Mozambique. In the 16th century, the first permanent Portuguese communities in the region were established in Mozambique. This country welcomed a number of white farmers who moved here from Zimbabwe as a consequence of the controversial land reform in the country. Portuguese is the official language and lingua franca of Mozambique. Their dialect, called Mozambican Portuguese, is closer to Standard European Portuguese. Hence, the white population of Mozambique is as a result of the descendants of the colonial period and also immigrants from Zimbabwe. At number 9, we make it to Botswana. The percentage of white people in Botswana is 3%, which is about 70,800 white people. Botswana, a southern African landlocked country, is known as one of Africa's most exclusive safari destinations. Once under the British protectorate, Botswana is now independent and has been like that for more than half a century. Botswana's white population consists of British English-speaking people and Dutch descendants which speak Afrikaans and are known as Afrikaners. There is also quite a large community of Serbs, a nation of South Slavic people from Balkans descent, which are all whites. At number 8 on our list is Kenya. The percentage of white people living in Kenya is 0.2%, which is about 103,500 people. Kenya, a country from East Africa which sits on the equator, is very diverse, with Swahili being the native language. However, English is also an official language. European colonization of the country began in the 19th century with the British Empire establishing the East Africa Protectorate. Almost 80 years later, the independent Republic of Kenya was formed. Over the past few years, the black and the white peoples of Kenya have been at odds over space of watered lands. Number 7 on our list is Morocco. The percentage of white people living in Morocco is 0.3%, which works out to about 109,400 people. This largely mountainous country in the northern part of the continent has both Mediterranean and Atlantic coastlines surrounding its borders. The Berbers make the majority of its population, inhabiting Morocco for the last 5 millennia. The Arabs conquered the land in the 7th and then again in the 11th century. When it comes to its white population, it mainly consisted of French whites, even though before the country gained its independence, it was settled by more than 500,000 Europeans. Now, the numbers can be counted. Number 6 on our list is Tunisia. For centuries, this rather small country at the northernmost point in Africa has quite an interesting large history. It's another country that's been inhabited by the Berbers since ancient times. From Phoenicians who founded Carthage to Romans, Ottoman Empire, and finally French colonizers in 1881, the country and its people have witnessed constant changes. Besides Arab Berbers, the country is also inhabited by French and a significantly smaller number of Europeans. The percentage of white people living in Tunisia is 1%, or about 117,400 people. Number 5 on our list is Madagascar. The percentage of white people living in this country is about 0.5%, which works out to around 133,000 of the country's population. This island country in the Indian Ocean is home to a large number of French people, even though the first European to set foot on the island was Diogo Diaz, a Portuguese sea captain in 1500 on his way to India after being blown off course. The country is an interesting blend of Asian and African landscapes, and the same can be said when it comes to the origins of the Malagasy people. During history, they've been pretty hostile when it comes to European settlers, since their attempts in establishing trading settlements have failed. Finally, in 1896, France annexed Madagascar after the British gave up their claims to the island, and this gave way for Europeans to settle in. Number 4. Namibia. When it comes to Namibia's white population, almost 2/3 of it speaks Afrikaans, a West Germanic language that has roots in Dutch. However, there are also those speaking German as well as English in Namibia. They are descendants of German as well as South African colonizers who were the country's rulers in the second half of the 19th century. At the beginning of the 20th century, the discovery of diamonds drew a huge number of Europeans to this country. It is one of the richest countries on the African continent. However, the wealth is mainly in the hands of European descendants. The infamous apartheid era took its toll in the country, more precisely in the period of South African control of Namibia in 1920. 70 years later, Namibia got its independence. The percentage of white people in Namibia is thought to be at 6.4%, or around 168,000 people. Number 3. Zambia. The percentage of white people in Zambia is 1%, or around 176,000 people. Zambia is a country in sub-Saharan Africa, a home to thousands of white people from South Africa and the United Kingdom. The country welcomed white farmers who had been expelled from Zimbabwe by supporters of Robert Mugabe, a Zimbabwean politician and revolutionary, as well as former prime minister from 1980 to 1987, and president of the country formerly known as Rhodesia from 1987 to 2017. Moreover, a few years ago, Mr. Guy Scott, a Democratic politician and member of Zambia's Patriotic Front Party, became the country's first white interim president upon the death of then-President Michael Sata on 28 October 2014. Number 2. Angola. The population of Angola includes around 1% white, which works out to around 300,000 people. Angola is the 7th largest country on the west coast of the African continent. From the first white settlements in the late 16th century to the beginning of the 20th century and a vast territory known as present-day Angola, Portuguese influence is evident in this country. The wars between supporters of white colonial politics on one side and anti-colonial nationalist movements on the other caused many people to flee the country during the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, including Angola's white population. The following excerpt is from an article in the New York Times dated 31 August 1975, which told the story of the mass exodus of Portuguese people from Angola. Quote, "The Portuguese are calling it the biggest exodus in the history of Africa. They are probably right. Its portions are frightening and its implications tragic both for a country and a people. Not even the notorious Congo migrations can equal the scale of the whites fleeing Angola at this moment. Whereas a mere 90,000 left the Congo in the first 6 months of 1960, already 200,000 have fled Angola, and the total will probably number 350,000 of Angola's estimated 500,000 white population. And all this despite the almost complete absence of racial overtones to Angola's bitter civil war." End quote. Number 1 on our list takes us to the extreme bottom of the continent of Africa and the Republic of South Africa. After Portuguese navigators Bartholomew Dias and Vasco da Gama discovered the south of the continent, the first colony was founded at Cape Town by Dutch East India Company in 1652. By the end of the 18th century, it became a British colony, only to be returned to Dutch a few years later. The conflicts between the British Empire and Boer settlers, the descendants of the Dutch settlers, culminated by the beginning of the 20th century in the South African Anglo-Boer War, which ended when the Boers were defeated in 1902. The The second half of the 20th century was colored with racial segregation and rule of the white minority known as apartheid. In 1994, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, after being imprisoned for over 27 years as a political prisoner but whom never stopped fighting for equality and the rights of all people in South Africa, became the first black president of South Africa. Mandela, who most South Africans refer to as Tata Madiba, his clan name, or sometimes the Father of South Africa, worked to put an end to violence and racial segregation, leading the way to a peaceful transition to a rule of the majority. Mandela's legacy lives on even though the former president and struggle icon died in 2013 with acts of charity and service to others. Today, South Africa is the country with the largest white population on the continent. In addition, around 1/10 of the South African population are whites, even though over the past few years the country's white population is shrinking. Well, that's the end of our video. We hope you liked it. Did you learn anything interesting about the African countries we mentioned? If so, let us know down in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, please give it a like. And while you're at it, hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified when AfroPage releases a new video. Don't go anywhere. We have plenty more great videos about Africa like these waiting for you.